Hey, we're going to break a little early this today. We're going to do it, and I hope you can have the time or you have the time to break with me. But I am excited to be here this morning. So let me ask you something. Has life actually gotten harder for you, or does it feel like everything's coming at you at once? I know for me, it does a lot. And sometimes it's not that anything is major happening, but sometimes it is, right? But still, everything, absolutely everything, suddenly feels like it's coming at you at once. And I definitely have days like that. And I'm sure you do. But it's not necessarily one big thing, one major thing happening in your life. It's just everything. Everything is just hitting you at once. I mean, things like your messages that you're getting, the decisions that you have to make, and people needing things or needing your attention or just want to talk and you want to be there for them, right? And information is coming in from everywhere. I mean, our phones, the TV, our whatever screen that you find yourself in front of, because we all have some screen that we have to look at throughout the day. And so, somewhere in the middle of all of this, you realize I don't have the space just to think. I don't have time to think. Can you imagine yourself saying that? I don't have the time to think. And that's what I'm talking about when I say life gets too loud. I'm not talking about noise in a room. And yes, that's a sense of loud, but there are different types of louds in our life. And what I'm talking about is the loudness that is going on in your mind. And when that happens, a lot of us start telling ourselves something must be wrong. I mean, I've always been able to handle this before. It's never felt like this before. Something is going on, and we feel that we should still be able to handle everything the way that we used to, right? But what if the issue isn't you? What if the issue is the volume of life has actually changed? And you're like, what? That's what I want to talk about today. Let's talk about when life starts feeling loud. And I'll tell you later why that's so important, that analogy there. Because you begin to notice it when everything feels like it's coming to you or coming at you at the same time, right? And that's kind of how you feel when sounds get too loud. You know, your messages, your decisions, all the things we talked about, your responsibilities, right? Things that people need for you and things you're thinking about handling or you're trying to remember to handle. And how many lists do you have? I have three, and I have for a reason. But I have a book that I write in my what do you call it? My calendar that I write into all the time, right? And then I also have my to-do list, and then I also have my calendar. So I have two digital things to pop up and remind me. And then I have this thing I write in because sometimes it's nothing like writing things in, right? And still you feel like everything's coming at you. And what starts to happen is you realize something important, that you don't have the space to think. No space in your schedule, no space in your mind, that you don't even have a moment to sit with something long enough to decide what to do with it. How do I handle this? And that's when life begins to feel too loud. Like I said, not in that physical way, but in a way that, well, that your nervous system experiences it. And you might even feel like doing what kids do. I remember kids always, when they become overwhelming. And I'm going to tell you more about this. And they want to put, I've done it even as an adult. I want to put my hands over my ears and just say, stop it, or hold my head for a moment, because my system is saying, I just need a moment. I need space. I just need to think. And when I really realized, you know, when I saw the greatest analogy of this is when I was talking to my little granddaughter, and she's high functioning autistic, and she told me she got in trouble in school on the bus, and I said, "Why did you yell on the bus?" And she told me, "Because it was too loud." And for her, what that does is she's really sensitive to sounds and sensations, and she's very sensitive to these things in her environment. And what this does to her is it just overloads her system. And it wasn't that the noise itself was the problem. It was that her nervous system, get this, couldn't process that much input at once. And sometimes life can start to feel like that. And so, what we did for her, or what her mom did, is they got her headphones. And when she rides the bus, she wears the headphones. And last time I talked to her, I said, "So, how are you acting on the bus?" She says, "Good." I said, "Is it still loud?" She says, "Not with my headphones." And so she's found a way to interrupt that loudness in her life and to deal with it. And it's not because in our lives anything terrible is happening, but because too many signals are coming in at the same time. And we were not designed like that, to take in this much. That's when your brain, it tries to multitask. And I'm sorry, I always have to say multitasking is a fallacy or mostly a myth. Okay? What we're really doing is rapidly switching attention. That's what we're doing. And something gets lost in that. And that constant switching actually becomes exhausting, because you're asking your mind to do multiple things at once. And I always use this analogy of your computer. And how many times have you kept hitting the mouse in your computer to do this, do this, do this, and finally it says, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" And it freezes. And that's what happens to us. And for us, a lot of times we see the effect of that later, especially at night. And we finally lay down, and suddenly your mind starts running. It's starting to try to process everything that you had to do today, everything that you want to remember, and ideas come up. And then you seem to things you didn't remember before seem to come up, and you want to write it down, and you want to put it, but you're too tired to get up and put it down. And those creative thoughts just bombard you. Oh my gosh. And you think, "Oh, I'll remember it in the morning." And how many of us actually remember it in the morning? Because you're too tired to get up and capture them. I don't get up. I even had, for a while, I had this notebook beside the bed because I'll remember to get, but I noticed something. If I take the time to do that, that makes me more awake, which interrupts my sleep and makes it harder to go back, right? So I have to make a decision there. What's more important, my sleep or this idea? My sleep. So then the next day, when you actually have the time and the energy, those things are gone. All those wonderful thoughts, all those creative ideas, all those things that you knew you needed to remember to do, you forgot, because the day has already started and it's filling your mind with new input, new things. So the real issue isn't always the amount of work. sometimes that real issue is the lack of mental space between things. And when there's no space between things, life starts to feel loud. You want to put your hand over your ears. You want to put your head in your hands, right? Everything in nature operates in a rhythm and a season. And that includes our minds, our bodies, and there's a rhythm to life, and there's a season to grow, right? A season to shine, a season to rest, a season to be dormant. And everything moves through cycles. Even our bodies operate that way, and they're that way. So think about sleep. Remember, I just said I decide to take that time to go to sleep because our sleep has cycles. There's the light sleep, the deep sleep, the REM sleep, and they all serve different purposes. And your brain processes information, your body restores itself, and your system recalibrates. And when we don't allow that space for those things to happen, when we don't allow for each one of those cycles of sleep to happen, our brain can't recalibrate, it can't rejuvenate. And what happens is when we don't allow the natural cycle of life to happen, the things that need to happen, the eating, the sleep, whatever it is that you're skipping and you're not doing, or you're deciding that you don't have time to, without those cycles, the body stops functioning properly. And that's life. There are supposed to be seasons of effort and seasons of recovery. But the world we live in now rarely allows that rhythm. Tell me if that's true for you. Are you having those seasons of effort, but also having those seasons of recovery? Or are you constantly on fire? Are you constantly firing? Is your nervous system constantly firing and trying to take in the information, process the information? That constant input, that constant response, that constant communication, and that constant expectation. Are you allowed to walk through this? Are you allowed to process to this? Or do messages never stop? Information never stop. People needing things never stop. There is no natural pause built into the system anymore. So instead of moving through seasons, many of us live in one long season of pressure. And when pressure never releases, think of a pressure cooker. The nervous system never gets the signal that it's safe to reset. It just keeps running. Eventually, that constant stimulation begins to feel like just noise. If you're old enough, it reminds me of Charlie Brown. And when the teacher called, what did she sound like? Wah, 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 wah. Remember that? That's what your life starts to sound like. And that's what I'm talking about when life gets too loud. But that's not always what happens. Most often, the first thing that happens is shutdown. You're saying, I can't do this. I can't. I just can't. And you shut down. Sometimes we shut down physically, but more often we shut down emotionally. We start going through the motions of life, but there's this there's this sense that something inside of you has gone quiet. We're still functioning, but we aren't fully present. We can almost feel robotic. And when I was thinking about this, I thought about a movie, The Stepford Wives, the original. And I remember the wives, all the men got wives. They traded in their old wives for these robotic wives. And I remember this one scene where this woman was like, "You want a cup of coffee? You want a cup of coffee? You want a cup of coffee?" And she got stuck. Now, that's an extreme example, but sometimes that's what overload can look like in real life. You're stuck in the motion of doing, and you keep doing the next thing that needs to be done. But your system doesn't actually have the space to process anything. And then we add, excuse me, the digital environment on top of that. When many women, myself included, we try to take a break, but we don't actually rest. We take a break. Oh, I'm going to take a break. In fact, I hope you're taking a break with me right now, but you don't rest. We scroll, which means that the nervous system is still receiving. It's still receiving information, it's still receiving and processing images, it's still catching other people's opinions, it's still being stimulated, right? Even reading can sometimes add more input instead of creating that quiet that it used to create. So there is never a real moment where the system stops receiving signals. Tell me, do you feel what I'm talking about? Because eventually the nervous system finds its own way to try to shut things down. And for some of us, that shows up as sleeping more, because that's the only time you think that you can get your mind to stop, but it's still going on in the background, because sleep is the only place that you feel that you can finally quiet things. And for others, it shows up as not sleeping well at all, because you feel your mind still going. You're still processing, you're still thinking. And so insomnia becomes common. The brain is still processing everything it receives during the day, right? So, what many of us interpret as stress or failure is sometimes simply your nervous system saying, "I've reached capacity. I can't take it anymore. I can't do it anymore. I'm done." And when my ladies hear conversations like this, they immediately want the answers. We're doers. We're looking for that solution. We want to step in there and do what needs to be done. And so we want the access to the next step. I recently had a conversation with one of my ladies who asked about my community, the Undivided, right? And I have a process that we go through at the very beginning. And she asked me, can I see everything else? Can I jump ahead? And she wanted access to everything right away. Remember, we're talking about access, right? And wanting to know things ahead of time and wanting to fix things ahead of time, that's normal. But the reason that I have my ladies go through the first 30 days slowly is because something deeper has to happen first. And most people today don't even realize how far removed we are from the natural rhythm of life. The pace of life has been accelerating for decades. Each generation experiences more input, more stimulation, more constant activity than the one before it. And for many people now, the nervous system has never known anything different. So when you try to explain what slowing down or creating space actually means, it's difficult to get your hands around that. What do you mean? Creating space. Slowing down? That's a joke, right? Not because anyone is unwilling, but because you've never experienced that kind of rhythm before, especially based on what area you were born in. Or if you have, we've forgotten that pace and that flow. And that's where the real understanding begins. Most of you think what you want is relief, right? Relief from stress, relief from pressure, relief from that constant noise. But when you listen closely to what's really being said, it's something deeper than that. You don't just want to get through life, you want to live life. Not push through the days, not survive the responsibilities, not constantly moving from one thing to the next. You want to feel like you're actually living inside of your lives again. And sometimes the first step towards that is not fixing anything anymore. It's simply recognizing maybe life hasn't become impossible. Maybe it has just become too loud. And your system is finally asking for something different. I hope today that somehow in the midst of this, you begin to see how your life has become too loud and how it's affecting you and how you process through life. And I want you to know that that can be recalibrated and changed. And so I want you to know also that I'm Mischelle O'Neill and you are on Break Time Live. And this was so important to me that I even forgot to talk about it in the beginning. But it doesn't matter really who I am. What matters is who you are. And is your life too loud? Let's talk more. Until next time, take care. Bye bye.